The Fulness of Life by Edith Wharton. For hours she had lain in a kind of gentle torpor, not unlike that sweet lassitude which masters one in the hush of a midsummer noon, when the heat seems to have silenced the very birds and insects, and lying sunk in the tasseled meadow grasses, one looks up through a level roofing of maple leaves at the vast shadowless and unsuggestive blue. Now and then, at ever-lengthening intervals, a flash of pain darted through her, like the ripple of sheet lightning across such a midsummer sky. But it was too transitory to shake her stupor, that calm, delicious, bottomless stupor into which she felt herself sinking more and more deeply, without a disturbing impulse of resistance, an effort of reattachment to the vanishing edges of consciousness. The resistance, the effort, had known their hour of violence, but now they were at an end. Through her mind, long harried by grotesque visions, fragmentary images of the life that she was leaving, tormenting lines of verse, obstinate presentments of pictures once beheld, indistinct impressions of rivers, towers, and cupolas, gathered in the length of journeys half forgotten. Through her mind there now only moved a few primal sensations of colorless well-being, a vague satisfaction in the thought that she had swallowed her noxious last draught of medicine, and that she should never again hear the creaking of her husband's boots, those horrible boots, and that no one would come to bother her about the next day's dinner, or the butcher's book. At last even these dim sensations spent themselves in the thickening obscurity which enveloped her, a dusk now filled with pale geometric roses, circling softly, interminably before her, now darkened to a uniform blue blackness, the hue of a summer night without stars, and into this darkness she felt herself sinking, with the gentle sense of security of one upheld from beneath. Like a tepid tide it rose around her, gliding ever higher and higher, folding in its velvety embrace her relaxed and tired body, now submerging her breast and shoulders, now creeping gradually with soft inexorableness over her throat to her chin, to her ears, to her mouth. Now it was rising too high. The impulse to struggle was renewed. Her mouth was full. She was choking. Help! "It's all over," said the nurse, drawing down the eyelids with official composure. The clock struck 3. They remembered it afterward. Someone opened the window and let in a blast of that strange neutral air which walks the earth between darkness and dawn. Someone else led the husband into another room. He walked vaguely, like a blind man on his creaking boots. She stood, as it seemed, on a threshold, yet no tangible gateway was in front of her. Only a wide vista of light, mild yet penetrating, as the gathered glimmer of innumerable stars, expanded gradually before her eyes, in blissful contrast to the cavernous darkness from which she had of late emerged. She stepped forward, not frightened, but hesitating, and as her eyes began to grow more familiar with the melting depths of light about her, she distinguished the outlines of a landscape, at first swimming in the opaline uncertainty of Shelley's vaporous creations, then gradually resolved into distincter shape, the vast unrolling of a sunlit plain, aerial forms of mountains, and, presently, the silver crescent of a river in the valley, and a blue stenciling of trees along its curve. Something suggestive in its ineffable hue of an azure background of Leonardo's, strange, enchanting, mysterious, leading on the eye and the imagination into regions of fabulous delight. As she gazed, her heart beat with a soft and rapturous surprise. So exquisite a promise she read in the summons of that Highland distance. And so death is not the end after all. In sheer gladness she heard herself exclaiming aloud, I always knew that it couldn't be. I believed in Darwin, of course. I do still. But then Darwin himself said that he wasn't sure about the soul. At least I think he did. And Wallace was a spiritualist. And then there was St. George Mivart. Her gaze lost itself in the ethereal remoteness of the mountains. How beautiful! How satisfying, she murmured. Perhaps now I shall really know what it is to live. As she spoke, she felt a sudden thickening of her heartbeats, and looking up she was aware that before her stood the Spirit of Life. Have you never really known what it is to live? The Spirit of Life asked her. I have never known, she replied, that fullness of life which we all feel ourselves capable of knowing, though my life has not been without scattered hints of it, like the scent of earth which comes to one sometimes far out at sea. And what do you call the fullness of life? The Spirit asked again. Oh, I can't tell you if you don't know, she said, almost reproachfully. Many words are supposed to define it. Love and sympathy are those in commonest use. But I am not even sure that they are the right ones, and so few people really know what they mean. You were married, said the Spirit. Yet you did not find the fullness of life in your marriage? Oh, dear, no, she replied with an indulgent scorn. My marriage was a very incomplete affair. And yet you were fond of your husband. You have hit upon the exact word. I was fond of him, yes. Just as I was fond of my grandmother, and the house that I was born in, and my old nurse. Oh, I was fond of him, and we were counted a very happy couple. But I have sometimes thought that a woman's nature is like a great house full of rooms. There is the hall, through which everyone passes in, going in and out, the drawing-room, where one receives formal visits, the sitting-room, where the members of the family come and go as they list. But beyond that, far beyond, are other rooms, the handles of whose doors perhaps are never turned. No one knows the way to them. No one knows whither they lead. And in the innermost room, the Holy of Holies, the soul sits alone and waits for a footstep that never comes. And your husband, asked the Spirit after a pause, never got beyond the family sitting-room? Never, she returned impatiently. And the worst of it was that he was quite content to remain there. He thought it perfectly beautiful. And sometimes, when he was admiring its commonplace furniture, insignificant as the chairs and tables of a hotel parlor, I felt like crying out to him, Fool, will you never guess that close at hand are rooms full of treasures and wonders, such as the eye of man hath not seen? Rooms that no step has crossed, but that might be yours to live in, could you but find the handle of the door. Then, the Spirit continued, those moments of which you lately spoke, which seemed to come to you like scattered hints of the fullness of life, were not shared with your husband? Oh, no, never. He was different. His boots creaked, and he always slammed the door when he went out, and he never read anything but railway novels and the sporting advertisements in the papers, and in short, we never understood each other in the least. To what influence, then, do you owe those exquisite sensations? I can hardly tell. Sometimes to the perfume of a flower, sometimes to a verse of Dante or of Shakespeare, sometimes to a picture or a sunset, or to one of those calm days at sea, when one seems to be lying in the hollow of a blue pearl. Sometimes, but rarely, to a word spoken by someone who chanced to give utterance, at the right moment, to what I felt but could not express.